WWDC was yesterday, and being a developer event, we were expecting software announcements, and we did. We got updates for iOS, watchOS, macOS, and iPadOS. We even got a couple of hardware announcements. So, with all that said, there's a lot to discuss.
Now, let's talk about sports.
Let's talk about WWDC 2022. First up was iOS, and this was by far the biggest set of announcements. We got a whole bunch of new features that were announced, and there were some welcome additions added. The most visual change was the new lock screen. It kind of reminds me of a big Apple Watch. You can customize the clock typeface, colors, and some filters on the background image. In addition, they've added the ability for these subjects of your wallpaper to kind of sit in the foreground of the image and kind of overlay over the top of the time. It's a really neat depth effect, and I like what they're doing here. On top of that, they've added widgets to the lock screen. Again, they kind of feel Apple Watchy, the complications, but it's a welcome addition. You can also tie lock screens to focuses, so if you only want your calendar widget to show when you're in your work focus, you can do that. They've added the ability to create multiple lock screens, watch faces, and you can select them and cycle through or tie them again to focuses. Rounding out the new lock screen is the notification placement. They now roll in from the very bottom and kind of live in the bottom third of your screen. I like this a lot better. It's easier to reach, and it also leaves your wallpaper free and space for more widgets. They also unveiled live activities, which is kind of a persistent notification that will kind of update in the background. The idea is to limit the amount of pushes an app gives you. So think sports scores or your DoorDash driver going and picking up the order and then being on their way and being close and then now they're there. Instead of getting 4 separate discrete notifications, there'll just be a little timeline that shows you where they're at. Seems very useful. I'm excited to not have my phone buzz every couple minutes for all these different things. Next up is messages. You can now edit and undo send an iMessage. It works a lot like Snapchat or Telegram, where it'll show you a little edited badge letting the other user know that you've changed something or that a message was previously sent and now it's gone. You can also go back in and mark a chat unread. This is fantastic for me. I am notorious for getting a message, reading it, and thinking, I'm going to reply to that in just a minute. And then it's as if my brain deleted the entire thing. So I forget that I even read it in the first place and then it was sent. So now I can go in and mark it unread and get that notification saying, I need to go and reply to that. We got a pretty hefty update to dictation. It kind of feels a lot like what Google did last year with the Pixel, where your voice dictation and the keyboard are active simultaneously. As you're voice texting, you can stop, pause, edit. You can go back through and select a word with your finger and then replace it with your voice. Seems really useful. They also added auto punctuation to voice dictation, which is great. So maybe I'll finally stop getting these long stream of conscious messages from people who use voice dictation. You know who you are. Live text got an update, so before you could grab text from a photo and copy and paste it, you can do the same thing with videos now. It seems really cool. I can see a lot of people in school, or as Apple suggested, people who are writing code and want to share it amongst their collaborators. They can just have a video that you can grab the text from instead of having to type it all out, copy paste. They've added the ability to select the subject of a photo. It kind of reminds me of what Snapchat does for stickers, where you can trace out the outline of a person and it'll kind of detect where the edges are, and now you can use that as a sticker. Works a similar way, but it's just automatic. So if you're in a photo that has a pretty obvious foreground subject, you can grab it, drag it, and you can move it to any other app you want. So if you want to send just that image to somebody in an iMessage, you can. And it kind of looks just like a cutout PNG file. It's really cool, and it kind of seems like how they're achieving this depth effect on the lock screen. We also got a handful of smaller updates. The Wallet app now lets users accept tap to pay with just their iPhone, no extra hardware needed. You can create shared photo albums that have certain photos uploaded automatically based on things like location or subjects. This redesigned home app that segments your accessories by your room, shows live video feeds, and adds quick categories to the top of the page. They also give a pretty big tease to an update to CarPlay. Not only will CarPlay be able to take over your infotainment like it does now, but it will be able to take over every screen of your car. So think your instrument cluster or being able to control climate controls, things like that. The CarPlay stuff is a couple years out, but it makes me think of a couple big things. One, that car manufacturers are still really bad at making software. And two, are we putting too much information in our field of view as we drive? I don't know, it seems like a lot of stuff to distract me from the road. It's very cool, and I like that you can customize all of it, but it still seems like a step too far. Then we get to watchOS, and this one was pretty light. There are a handful of new watch faces, and they've added some more motion tracking to be able to get more granular running data. They also added more detailed sleep tracking, so you'll be able to see deep sleep versus light sleep versus REM. You'll be able to go in the morning and see when you oscillated between those, and it's cool that you can get that kind of data, but I still can't comfortably wear my Apple Watch to bed, so it probably won't be for me, but it's neat that they added it. They also added medication tracking, not just to the watch, but to the health app at large. You'll be able to track what meds you're on, you'll be able to set reminders to take them at certain times of day, and you'll also be able to see the interplay between them. So if you add a new medication that may interact odd with another one you're already taking, it's going to let you know that. It seems pretty useful. It also seems like something a third-party app already does pretty well, but it's a welcome addition for those that don't use those already. Moving on to Mac, they started off by announcing the M2. It is a pretty minor update overall, with about an 18% performance update over the M1. It's got 50% more memory bandwidth and now up to 24 gigs of unified memory. It can also get around 35% more graphics performance than the M1, and the neural engine can process 40% more. Alongside the M2, they announced a redesigned MacBook Air. It honestly looks like a trimmed down 14-inch MacBook Pro, and I think that's a good thing. I did like the wedge design, but it's about 11 years old now, and I do like this new direction they're going, and it's a welcome change. Inside that new redesigned body, there's a new 13.6-inch display, notch included. In that notch, there's a new 1080p webcam, improved speakers, beamforming mics, MagSafe with fast charging, and Touch ID. I want to put this thing through its tests when it's up for sale next month, starting at $11.99. Oh, and they stuck an M2 in the 13-inch MacBook Pro. macOS gets its name changed this year, and they're calling it Ventura. It's got a few updates, and the biggest one has to be the Stage Manager mode. Honestly, I don't think it's going to be that useful on Mac. They're bringing it to the M1 line of iPads too, and I think it's more useful there, but it's nice to see them changing things up. I probably won't use it, but it is pretty. They also talked about passkeys, which is their password replacement system. It essentially just uses Face ID and Touch ID as a replacement for username and password, and it's a good idea, and I like the fact that they're working with other OSs to be able to use passkeys through QR codes. But that does kind of imply that you'll need to create the account on an Apple device. So how will that fare if I'm making an account on my PC or an Android phone? Will I be able to create the account with a username and password and then replace it with a passkey later? It just seems a little clunky, and if they don't get full support from the other OSs, I just don't see this going very far. I do agree that passwords need to be replaced, but unless it's completely cross-platform start to finish, it's going to be dead in the water before it even hits market. Maybe the best update they announced with Ventura was continuity camera. Essentially, you use your iPhone as your webcam, which makes a lot of sense since they've been putting terrible webcams in computers for ever. They're going to have accessories made by Belkin to stick onto your phone and then set on top of your laptop screen or your monitor. And on top of that, they've added the ability to have what they're calling desk mode, which uses the ultra-wide camera to replicate a top-down view. It's really cool, and I'm excited to play with it because I want to see, one, how it works, and also, does it work well? Because obviously the camera's not pointed directly down, it's just using that extra wide field of view to crop out what it thinks is the right image. If it works, it's going to be really cool for a lot of people. They also talked more about gaming during the Mac section than I was expecting them to. They announced Metal 3 and a new upscaling engine. They also touted that No Man's Sky and Resident Evil Village are coming to Mac. They also showed off Resident Evil Village running at 1080p on the new MacBook Air, which honestly is pretty impressive considering this is a fanless device that doesn't have dedicated graphics. But the demo kind of looked bad. I mean, it's impressive, don't get me wrong, that they're getting this to run on their SoC. It just doesn't really feel like the Mac moment for gaming that I think they were expecting it to be, or maybe wanted people to think. Finally, we get iPadOS, and it gets all of the updates we saw with iOS 16, plus a couple of unique features of its own. Namely, the Stage Manager windowing mode is coming to all of the M1 iPads. I won't be able to test it myself because I still have the 2020 A series iPad Pro, but it looks cool and I could see myself using it, and I could see myself using it a lot more on iPad than on Mac. We also got a demo of Freeform, which is a collaboration tool built into FaceTime. Users in the call will be able to have a big whiteboard that they can go in and add text and drawings and other information they can share and work amongst each other. It honestly looks pretty cool, and the 6 people that use it, I think, are going to really like it. They briefly mentioned that Metal 3, along with its upscaling engine, is coming to iPad, and they added a downloading API to games, so you can download larger assets in the background, which, honestly, it's about time. It's not something that I really thought of all that much, but it's something that has been needed. Well, that pretty much wraps up the announcements from WWDC. I've got all of the betas installed on my devices, and I'm working on an impressions video to kind of show you the highlights of all of the changes we talked about and which ones are actually useful. Anyway, that's all for this one. I'll have that impressions video up sometime later today. I've been Jake, and I am very excited to talk to you in the next one. Oh, they announced weather for iPad.